Hello, everyone, and welcome to Project Insight's product training webinar. The topic for today is Set Up Your Project Insight Settings. Just a few things to note before we get started. All participants will be put on mute. However, any questions you have are more than welcome. Please go ahead and type those questions into your question box, which you can find on your GoToWebinar dashboard. We will try to answer all of your questions during the session, but if we can't, we'll make sure to get to you through email before the end of the day. Or you can also feel free to email us your questions at info@projectinsight.net. Also, do know this webinar recording will be available within our Project Insight community. My name is Denise, and I'll be your moderator for today. I'm here with Project Insight. If you're not already familiar with us, we're a cloud-based project management solutions. We help companies like The Gap and Cisco to collaborate on their projects with a globally dispersed team, balance their resources, and provide executives with real-time reports. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to reach me at denise.rodriguez@projectinsight.com. Our presenter and trainer for today will be Angie Smith. She is our partner out in Canada, and she is also PMP certified. Some of the benefits of today's webinar is to understand what each setting is for and how they factor into portfolio reports. We'll learn the settings and options. We'll select the settings that are right for your business process. On our agenda today, we'll go over how to learn the various global settings, set up your organizational default work schedule, list your project types, set up project status indicators, enter time and expense codes, and we'll also learn how to create your resource departments, list your user types, set up skill sets and resource type and roles, and create options for issue tracking. That is all I have on my end. Now I'm happy to hand this over on to Angie to continue with the rest of today's webinar. Welcome, Angie.
Great, thank you, Denise. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show my screen, and everybody should be seeing the Project Insight dashboard. Now, Project Insight is very customizable and configurable so that you can adapt it to meet your business processes, instead of you having to adapt your business processes to match the software. And a big part of this is setting up your Project Insight settings. So you can enter and set up configuration data that matches how you do your work and conduct your business. This is all available within the core functionality of Project Insight. You don't need your IT department or professional services to set up this information. Your system administrator can do it. So all of this is done in the administration section of Project Insight. And to get there, you want to go ahead and expand the left navigation, then click on the administration section to expand it out. And of course, not everyone is going to have access to the administration section. Only your administrators are actually going to see this menu option in the left navigation. So if you click on administration, you'll see that it is organized so that the most used functions appear at the top and are grouped logically, making it easy to find the relevant functions. So for example, anything to do with users is in the users section, and anything to do with projects is in the projects section. And again, only your system administrator can make any changes basically to the projects and below. Other users may be given access to manage companies or users or groups. Now, you're not going to see all the sections in administration in today's session because some of them are covered in other training sessions, such as the Determine Your Best Configuration options and Secure Your Project Insight data with permissions. However, you will learn what are the main settings you need to enter and how they are used. And once you've learned how to enter settings in one place, you will be able to repeat that in all other places because the interface is the same. So each set of data you enter is different and used for different purposes, but how you enter it is consistent. And that makes it really easy for your administrator to quickly set up the system with the data you need. So to navigate in the administration section, you can click on the arrow next to a section to expand that out and see all the items below it. For example, you can click on the arrow next to users, and that expands that out, and you can see all the options available for users. And then you can click on the down arrow to collapse it again. If you also just click directly on the text, it expands out all the menu options and also takes you to the first form in the first menu option. Now, if you also right-click on the text for a menu option, for example, if you right-click on the word projects, it will bring up it. So sorry, that actually doesn't apply in this case. Right-clicking so right-clicking works when you right-click basically on the white space of the main form. Now, Project Insight will also remember the sections you have expanded or collapsed and show those that way each time. So if you collapse the administration section now and then expand it again, you'll see it remembers that you had users and projects expanded out. Now, one very important feature of project management software is scheduling. So that is indicating, like, when is the work going to be done? So in order to do scheduling of your tasks on your project, you need to set up your work schedule. So in the Projects section, click on Default Work Schedule. And then go ahead and then collapse your left navigation so you have more room. Now, the default work schedules define the default standard number of hours your team works, when those hours start and end, and it also defines when your team doesn't work, such as, when are the company-wide holidays that everybody has vacation on or takes off. And again, all of this information is required so that Project Insights can schedule when a task is going to start and when it is going to end. Now, not every company works the same hours every day, and every company can have a different work schedules. Even within your own company, you may have different teams that work different schedules. For example, maybe your field team works 12 hours a day, 4 days per week, while everyone else works 8 hours per day, 5 days per week. You may also have teams in different geographical locations that work different start and end date times. For example, an 8-hour workday in the United States is standard, while a 7.5-hour workday in Canada is very common. So you may want to set up default work schedules to represent the circumstances for how your team most commonly works. So this is a list of all the default work schedules that are set up. And you must always have one default work schedule, and that is usually called the system default. And this may be the only default work schedule you have. If you have like just one office in one location and everyone generally works the same schedule, then all you may need is the system default. Or you may have multiple ones. So in this case, the system administrator has added a Canadian work schedule as well as a UK work schedule. Now, one thing that is important to understand is that these are default work schedules only. The information in here is used to create automatically user-specific work schedules, project-specific work schedules, and even task-specific work schedules. The user, project, and task work schedules that get created are the ones used for actual scheduling. However, they will reference the data set in these default schedules so that it reduces the amount of data entry that you have to do and set up, and also that you have to maintain. And you can also ensure that it maintains consistency, because if you set up a Canadian work schedule with all the Canadian holidays and then everyone uses that by default, that's set up consistently for every user and every project and every task schedule. Now, to add a new default work schedule, you just click in the gray blank line and type in the information. For example, maybe we want to enter in an India work schedule, because you have a team based out of India that gets assigned to projects. And of course, you could actually require multiple work schedules for one country, but for now, we're just going to keep it simple and enter one. Now, you're going to see as you progress through this training that this is the standard way that you add data in these settings. You click in the gray blank line that's on the form and just start typing. So you can see it's very simple and easy to do. Now, in most of these settings, you're going to have a name of the item, and you're also going to have an active column. So the active column indicates that the information is actively being used. If you uncheck it, that data is still retained in the system for historical reference purposes, but you can't use it going forward. That helps to maintain data integrity and enables you to make changes without having to go back and change everything you had previously. So let's click on active, make sure it's active for our new schedule, and we just click the save icon to save that information. And then that India work schedule gets listed. So that's how you create a new setting, and you're going to see that same process used in all of the settings in this session. Now you're also going to notice that for each work schedule, there is an edit icon and a delete icon. So to edit a work schedule, you can click the edit icon, or you can double click anywhere in the white space on the line, and that puts you into edit mode and you can make the changes. So you can see I want to actually capitalize the W, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Oops, and I just exited out here. Let's go back into edit mode. Put in a capital W, and it's not working on my keyboard for some reason. That's strange. But you can make the changes to the name and the active, and then not only can you just hit the save icon, but you can actually press enter too. That's the other way to save those changes. And if you want to delete a work schedule, you just click on the delete icon next to it. And you're going to get a confirmation prompt to confirm the delete, and you can go ahead and click OK. And you're not able to delete an item that's in use. For example, if you had the India work schedule as the default schedule for a specific user, then the system would not allow you to delete it. In that case, you would just set it to inactive instead. And again, that theory applies to all the settings you see in this training session and not just the default work schedule. Now, you may notice that the system default work schedule has no delete icon. And as it was said earlier, you must always have at least one default work schedule, so you're never able to delete that one that is set as the system default. You could click the edit icon, though, and change the name to something more descriptive, such as the US work schedule. There, finally got my W to work. So you could say, set it as a US work schedule, which becomes the inherent system default. But I'm going to leave it, I'm going to click cancel instead of saving that change because I do want to leave it set as the standard terminology that a lot of you'll see. So once you've entered in the work schedule, you want to set up your work hours and your holidays. So to do that, you click on the name. So for example, for the system default, we're going to click on that name. And it takes us to our form where we can enter in our default schedule. So you can see that a standard workday has already been set up. You work from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., then there's 1 hour for lunch, and then 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. And that basically happens for each day of the work week. And then on Saturday and Sunday, there's no work hours at all, so people generally don't work on the weekends. So you do want to set this to reflect the most common hours your staff work, but it is very common that not all of your team are going to work this exactly. Maybe they take a half-hour lunch one day and leave at 4:30 instead of 5 o'clock. And that's okay. When you define a workday in Project Insight in these default work schedules, you're defining your workday in general, not for specific individual start and leave times. And you can set specific individual start and end times and different work schedules, but you do that separately from in here. So remember, this is your default and what normally represents your default workday. Now you do also want to ensure that your default workday length and your default work date start and your default work date end are also set to represent the most common schedules you use. Now you also want to set your full-time equivalent as well. such as the hours per day for full-time, the hours per week, and the hours per month. And this gives you resource requirement reporting based on the number of full-time employee equivalents. And this is the data that's used in making those kinds of calculations. Also, you want to make sure your default workday length equates to the work hours you scheduled in each workday. The reason is that the default workday length and the start and end values are used in different resource calculations than the actual work schedule, which is used in scheduling. So if you don't set them to all be consistent, you may get some inconsistent results in different places that might cause you to go, So try and keep them as consistent, and then you'll see consistency throughout all the reporting. You also want to set up your standard holidays. So to do that, click on Holidays, Non-Work Days, and Special Days. So you can set up not only holidays, but also other corporate-wide non-working days or times or special days. For example, maybe you let everyone off on December 24th at 12 o'clock. So that would be a special day. Or if you gave everyone a bonus day off each year, that may be a non-working day. So this is used mostly, though, to set up your company-wide holidays. So we're going to start by adding in a common holiday in North America, which is January 1st or New Year's Day. So I'm going to click on the calendar for the first date, and I'm going to click on my right arrow to navigate to, basically we want to go and set it for next year. And then we're going to click on January 1st. So if you had multiple holidays, you could enter a range here, but otherwise just leave the range as one date for now. And then the next step is to categorize that date. So you need to specify why it is a non-working day. So for this case, click on Holiday, and then click on the plus sign to add it. You can see now that January 1st is listed as a holiday. And you can see that someone had already set up some other holidays in here. So basically, Christmas Day was booked off, Christmas Eve was booked off, and also the first working day after Christmas Day, which here in Canada is called Boxing Day, and it is a holiday day. But if it was in the States, I know the States doesn't get that, so you could just delete that and remove that holiday. Now, how you categorize the information here with these options affects the time entry grid. So you can choose whether or not to show days marked as holidays on your time entry grid, or days marked as shutdown or non-working times on the time entry grid. And whether you do that or not will be dictated by your business process. So to continue to set up all the holidays that you have, but make sure you click on the plus sign each time to add it to your list. And you will want to set up a process where you enter your company-wide holidays each year. And you're often going to do that maybe like in the fall, because it'll depend on when you start planning your next year's projects. You know, before you start doing the planning for your next year's projects, you'll want to make sure that you get in the default work schedule for that next year. Now, when you're done entering them all, you can check some other options down here at the bottom. So click on the Automatically Recalculate Schedules Now for active and planning projects, which may be affected by the work schedule changes made. If you turn that option on, Project Insight will recalculate the schedules for active and planning projects that are affected by the changes made. If you don't click that, then those new schedules will be applied to new projects, and they'll be applied to existing projects, but only when project managers make changes to those projects. And you can also choose to send an email to the project managers of all active and planning projects, which may be affected by the work schedule changes. So if you check that, it's going to say, it's going to take a couple minutes. And then if you do that, you want to do that, check the next box so that your project managers get an email. Now, it's important to know that you haven't actually saved these changes in the system yet. To do that save, you must actually click the Save option. If you just navigated off of this form without clicking that Save option, then none of those changes will be saved. So I'm just going to actually uncheck those because I don't want to make those updates, and I'm going to click Save. So then you can go and set up any other default work schedules as you require through that process. Now these default work schedules are used in different places. So each individual user has their own specific work calendar set up, and that individual's work calendar inherits the settings from one of these default calendars. So to set the default work schedule for an individual user, expand your left navigation. Then you want to click on Users, and then you want to click on the Edit icon for one of your users. Click the Resource Info tab, and there's an option in here called Work Calendar Inherits From. So click in the drop-down for that, and then you're going to see those default work calendars that you set up. So that information that's set here is used in two different places. So when you set it for a user, and that user creates a project, then the work schedule set here is used as the default for the project level calendar, but you can change it, of course. And secondly, the user's specific work calendar inherits the settings from this calendar. So to see how those settings work on a project, what we want to do is click on Folders. Well, we're going to collapse our administration section for a moment. Then we're going to click on Folders. And we're going to click on our Projects folder. And we're going to hover on the Add icon, and we're going to select to add a project. And then let's collapse the left navigation. And this is the Project Add Edit form. And more detail about all the data on this form can be found in the Building Your First Project training session. Now what you'll see is the default work calendars that you just set up, and you can see that it's defaulting to the system default. So for this user, we had the system default calendar set up as their calendar, so this is where it's pulling this from. So it'll populate the field automatically with the default work schedule specified for the user, but you can click in the drop-down and change it if required. So basically, how this is used is that when you create this project, a specific project level calendar also gets created automatically. And the information in that calendar will inherit the settings from the default work schedule set here. But then you can modify that project-specific calendar if you need to, or just leave all the defaults and don't change it. So that's a quick overview of the use of the default work schedules. But for more detailed information on that, you can attend our training session called Setting Up Global and Resource Work Schedules Training. Now you can also see that when you're adding a project, you can assign a type to it. So click in the drop-down for the type, and you can see that there's different categories that have been set up and that you can assign to this project and used for reporting on projects and also for doing roll-ups by projects in your portfolio. And you can define what these types are going to be according to your reporting requirements and your business. So to see where you define those, expand back out the left navigation, click on Projects, click on Administration. Make sure your Projects section is expanded out by clicking on the arrow if it's not already. And then we want to click on Project Types. And then again, we can collapse our left navigation. So you can see that you can add data in here the same way as you entered a default work schedule. To add a new type, you just click in the gray blank line and start typing, such as we're going to enter in a type called Field Services. And then you can see there's actually a couple of additional columns on this form. So the code you'll see quite often in various settings, and it's usually used for integration purposes. So if you're integrating to a CRM system or an ERP system, and they have special codes for project types other than what you enter here, then you can type in that code in this part to make that connection. If you're not doing an integration or data export to another application, then you're just going to leave this code blank. Then next you have the order. This is also a common field on most lookup lists. So by default, lists will display in alphabetical order by the name. So whatever you enter it in over here, it'll display in alphabetical order. And so you can see that what you can do is override that alphabetical order by actually typing in an order number. So for this new one, we're going to enter it as the 5th because we want it to appear as the last item on the list. So you can see that the order they're set in right now, and we're already sorting on that. We can tell by this little arrow in the column header. So if we weren't, so let's actually save this. If we clicked on the name column, and that's how you sort on a column, is just click on the text. So you can see this is how they would display in the lookup lists in alphabetical order. But we've overridden that order with a number, and you can see this is how they're actually going to display. So you can see that by clicking on that order to sort on that column. So then again, you've got the save and cancel button and the edit and delete options, the same as you've seen previously. Now when you create a project, it can only belong to one project type. It is a one-to-one relationship. If you want to create other project categories where a project can be more than one type of category, then you can do that by creating custom fields. And you can attend the Creating Custom Fields training session for more information on that. So now let's go back and expand the left navigation and click on Project Statuses. And this is another important setting that you want to configure. So the project statuses help you to manage projects and notify your executives, team members, and other stakeholders as to the status of the project as it moves through its life cycle. And you also want it to be easily recognizable visual indicators. So this is where you'll set up the statuses that your project can have as it travels through that life cycle. Now, some examples that some of our clients use are, normal priority, caution, urgent, or on hold. Other places might just use the term red, green, and yellow. But you can define this list to reflect what statuses you use in your business process. So you could use these options that are here, or you can define your own. And again, you're going to see all the same information in this setting that you have seen previously, which is the name, the code, the order, and an active column. However, there are a couple of additional columns that are specific to this project status setting. And the first is the display color. So when you define a status, you can have it display with a color associated with it. This is extremely useful as the status is immediately visible and recognizable as it is displayed with a color. So to see how that works, click on My Insight to go to your dashboard. And then in your list of projects, you can immediately the status of a project by that status symbol. And then also the description next to it. So our Office Move project is in a caution state. The software development is normal. Database development is normal. And then develop website for some reason is urgent. So this is also going to show on your project reports. So if you click on Reports, click on the project reports if it's not already selected. Then click on the General Project Reports section. Click on the arrow next to that to expand it out. And then click on, these are some predefined reports that have been set up in the system. And the project dashboard is a very common one, so click on that to run that report. And then you're also going to see that that status indicator appears on this report as well. And this is a report of all of your projects in the system that are active. You can also see things like the project type that's assigned to the project. And if you click on the display options for the report, and then you click on the project status and condition filtering options section to expand that out, you can see that you can actually filter project on this report by both the status, so you can see just the caution ones or the urgent ones. And then you can also select it by type. So you could choose just the information technology projects that are in a caution or urgent status. And just click on the white space to exit out of there, out of those drop-down lists. And now let's see if we run that report. You'll see we actually don't have any information technology projects that are urgent, caution or urgent. So let's go back in there and remove those filters, and we'll get everything again. So you can just remove it by clicking on it in the drop-down list. Then let's collapse that project status and condition filtering section, and let's go to our group by section. So another common way to report on your portfolio is to group by either the type or the status. So in the column drop-down, let's choose type. So we're going to click on that, and then we're going to click on the plus sign to add it. And then we'll also add in status. So let's erase what's in there and just type in status. So this is the other way to do it. If you start typing in information, it's going to narrow the list down to what you typed in. So click on status to choose it, and then make sure you click on the blue plus sign to put it in your list. If you don't click on this blue plus sign, it doesn't get, that group by doesn't get recorded. All right, so then we'll go ahead and run the report. So remember, we removed our filters, so we'll be getting everything again. So you're going to see, first of all, that we've got it grouped by the type. And then you can also see next to each type the number of projects in that type. And you'll also see totals by type as well. So you can see the total work hours by type and the overall percent complete by type. Then if we expand on an arrow next to a section to expand it out, we see the next subgrouping was by status. We can see that both of our projects for professional services are urgent. So if we click on that to expand it out, we can see what those actual projects are. Now to change the status indicator on a project, you do need to be a project manager, and it's the project manager's responsibility to change that indicator. Now you can also see here that there are some other separate health indicators for a project, and these ones are automatic indicators that Project Insight will set for you based on the information about the project. And let's see if we can maybe find another one here. Everybody's normal priority. There's a caution one. So we click on that and expand that out. You can see there's also an automatic indicator against that project as well. So when you see those automatic indicators, it's notifying that there are problems. You know, this project's not going according to the plan, and you need to check it and address the reasons why. Then, when you do that, what you want to do as the project manager is manually update that project status indicator to reflect what's going on with the automatic indicators, and also other things that are going on with the project, such as maybe number of open issues or action items that are there as well. So the automatic indicators, they give the project manager the data they need to see if project is going off track, and it does it all automatically based on the information that's entered. But you as the project manager are still in control of setting the overall project status indicator. And that's the project manager's job to do. You need to be in control and change that setting, you know, depending on the other things going on with the project. So to change the status indicator on a project, go ahead and click on the project name. So this one's yellow, but maybe we actually want to make it red as well. So let's click on the project name, click the project edit icon, click in the drop down for the status, and then we're going to change it to urgent, and then we're going to save that. And then we're going to click back on My Insight to get to the dashboard again. And now you'll see that Office Move project, instead of a yellow caution, it's now set to urgent. So there are 3 built-in colors for this status. It's red, green, and yellow, which you saw previously. However, if we go back to our administration section and go back to project statuses, you're going to see what the last column is in here, and that's called Upload Icon. So you can create your own status icon in any color and design that icon and upload it. So for example, for on hold, maybe you create a purple square to represent the on hold status and upload that. So click on the upload icon and then just click browse to go and find that icon. Now it's recommended, if you're doing this, that you download one of the default image colors first and then modify that so that you get all of the right sizing and pixels and all that kind of thing. So to do that, click on the My Insight to display your dashboard again. Right-click on one of the colors. And when you do that, a Project Insight context-sensitive menu appears. So we talked about that a little bit earlier. But we don't want the Project Insight menu. We actually want the browser menu. So in order to get to the browser menu, we click on Hide menu, which hides the Project Insight menu. Then right-click again, and then it brings up the browser menu instead of the Project Insight menu. So what we do is we go Save Picture As, and then save the picture. So I'm just going to leave it as lightred.png. So I'm just going to save it as that. So then now that I've saved actually this picture, I'll go and use some graphic editing software to edit that and change it to purple or a green or a purple square or whatever icon that I want, and I'll already have it all set up and sized correctly. Then once you've done that, again, just go back to your statuses and click that upload icon, and then you can have basically unlimited number of colors that you can assign to statuses. Now another setting that's very important is used by Project Insight to determine those health indicators is, and that's the automatic one. So remember it said that Project Insight calculates those automatic indicators. Well, it uses, part of what it uses to do that is a thing called the % complete that the task is. So if we click on the work % complete type in the project section of administration, we get this form, and I'm just going to collapse the left navigation. So your team members are responsible for updating the % complete on a task as they work on it. And this lets Project Insight know how far along the task is versus what is planned. And then the automatic health indicators are set based on that. Now setting an actual number for a % complete is great for your more analytical type teams. So I know a lot of companies that we deal with that have, engineers. Engineers love numbers and they love to put in a % complete, and it makes a lot of sense to them. But for other types of teams, like maybe like marketing teams, it's entering in a % is not that easy for them, because they have to sort of figure out, well, what's the % complete? Is it 40% or 50%, or how do I differentiate that? And it can actually be a roadblock for adoption in your team if you're asking them to enter something that, makes them have to really think hard, or, kind of have to double check what they should be entering. So to avoid all that, there is what we call a work % complete types that you can set up for your team to use instead. So you can see in this list that we have, work % complete values, but we've associated them with more user-friendly terms. So 50%, well, the user-friendly term for that is in progress, and 25%, the user-friendly term is started, and almost done is 75%. So having these user-friendly terms showing up to your team instead of actual numbers makes it easier for your team members and removes the fear of entering the wrong numbers, and makes it easy for them to do and increases the adoption of the system. But it's still providing the analytics to the back end of the system to do things like calculate those automatic health calculators and earned value and so on. So what you're seeing here is a pretty common set of work % complete types, but you could make them more detailed with smaller increments, such as like 10%, 20%, and so on if you want some tighter control on the earned value and status indicators. So it's up to you. Just make sure that the terms associated with the percent completes are easy to understand and easily recognizable to your team. And I've even seen some cases where they'll put in like a nice user-friendly term, and then they'll put a dash, and then they'll put the actual percent complete type. So, it's pretty flexible. You can put in what you want. And you're going to see more where that's used in the providing team member updates training session and also the track your time and enter expenses training sessions. Now, when you're entering your time and also expenses, you need to categorize those time and expenses. So, any of you that have used a payroll system or anything like that, this concept will be pretty familiar to you. So to set up your time and expense codes, you want to expand the left navigation, and we'll click on the arrow next to projects to collapse that, but we're going to click on the arrow next to time, expense, and invoice to expand that section out. Then click on the time and expense codes. And again, we'll collapse our left navigation to give us some more room to work with. So these settings, as you can see, contain quite a bit more columns of data than any of the other forms you've seen. And we go through these in detail in some other training sessions, but generally, you're going to enter time and expense codes to categorize and further delineate the different types of time you're entering. And you're also going to enter in codes to describe the different types of expenses you're entering. And then you can do reporting on that. So time codes could be something as simple as like a billable or non-billable, or a project or non-project. Or they could be very detailed, such as in this list, where you have administration, graphic design, programming, consulting, project management, consulting, vacation, and so on. Now, expense codes can be the same, but they're often more descriptive of the expense, such as, we've got hotel, meals, travel, supplies. So you do always need at least one time expense code set up before your team members can enter time or expenses. So if you don't use these in any other way, at minimum, set up one called General, and then just make sure that's enabled for both time entry. So you'd want to make sure this is set to yes for time entry, and expense entry is set to yes as well. And that's usually the only circumstance where you're going to have one time and expense code applicable to both time and expense entries. Normally, they're either going to be time like these ones or expenses like these ones, but not both. I mean, they could be, but most often they're not. So when you enter in a code, I'm just going to drag this over so we can see everything a little bit more. So if we say, I'm just going to enter in one called like new code just so you can see how this works. You put in a checkbox whether it can be entered for time or whether it can be entered for expense or both. Then you can set whether or not they're billable. So if you're doing billable work for external clients, you can check that on to make it a billable time code. Leave it turned off if it's not billable. If it can be both, check it. But then the next column here designates whether or not it must be billable. So again, you can toggle that on or off about whether it's billable or not. Then you can also specify at what level can this time code be used. And there's basically 3 levels. The most common one is our task entry. So you set up a task and you enter time against that task. So that's most commonly checked. Project entry is if you're going to allow time entered at the project level, and that's basically unplanned for time. So you want to decide whether or not you're going to allow that as part of your process. But if you do want to allow that, you could check that on. And then finally, you can also set up companies in the system and allow time entries directly against a company. And again, that's going to be like unplanned time. And sometimes, like for administration, you might set that up to be yes at the company level. Now, the next 3 options are basically just whether or not you have to enter in a description of the time entry. So when you're doing your time entries, there's a description field, and you can specify that field as required to be entered for each and every time entry. So if you check that off, you have to have a time entry description entered every time you do a time entry against that code. Now, for a task level time entry, it's already kind of defined because you've already set up a task for it. So that's not usually commonly checked, but sometimes if you're doing it at a project level or a company level, when it's more unplanned time, it's more commonly checked to require descriptions, so you know why is their unplanned time being recorded against this project. And then lastly is some options here for whether or not the time code and expense code is available to show on invoices. So you can check that on or off if you want them as an option to show on the invoices if you're generating invoices for customers. So invoices are covered in detail in another training session, so you can attend that session if you need some more details on that. But basically Project Insight doesn't generate the actual voice and manage it, but it generates all the details you need to put on your invoice. All right, so that's time and expense codes. So let's go back and expand out our left navigation. And the next option we're going to go to is departments. So we're going to click on the arrow next to users, and then we're going to click on departments. So the main use of departments is for assigning users to a department. And once that happens, then you can use that department to bulk assign users to a project. So you can basically say, when you create a project, assign all users in a department to that project automatically. Or you can also use this to view a list of your users by department. So if you go to My Insight, you can have a look at your directory of all the users in the system, and then you can filter that by department if you want to. The other way departments is used is that you can assign a project to a department and then run a report of projects by department. And that's most often used for organizations that do internal strategic type projects. You do want to capture the department that requested the project. So that's setting up departments, and you can also do some resource reporting as well and roll up, by department to see resource reports on a departmental level. Now the other way you can categorize users is by a user type. So click on user types, and you can see the different user types which are set up, and these are again some very common ones that our clients use. And what the user types are used for is, again, if you go to your directory, then you can view a directory of your users filtered by the user type. So user types are optional, you don't have to use them, but if you do have more than just your internal staff accessing the system, or you have groups of internal staff that aren't really represented by a department, then you can use this and set this up. Now what you don't want to do is confuse user types with the next setting, which is called resource types and roles. So let's collapse our users and expand, let's collapse our time, expense, and invoice as well, and then we'll expand out our projects. And in projects, there's a resource type and role. So this again is separate than a user type. Resource types and roles are where you define the different resource types or resource roles that you require on your project in order to accomplish the work. So where user types are just used to filter your list of users and is just a reference that doesn't have any back-end functionality associated with it, resource types and roles are used to do resource management and other resourcing functions, such as automatically assigning users to tasks depending on the abilities they have and the type of work required on the task. So you can see some common resource type roles set up here, such as let's see, where's our project manager? Right there, there's our project manager. If you're an IT team, you might see things like a business analyst. QA is the other one I'm looking for. I don't know if that's set up in here. You can also see things like a marketing coordinator or a designer or a graphic artist. So you can set up whatever resource type roles are specific to your industry. Now then once you do that, when you create a task in a project plan, you indicate what resource type role is required to complete the work on that task. And you do that by choosing a role from this list that you set up here. Then also, when you add your users, you will identify what skill sets they have and that they're able to perform by choosing from this list. And users can have more than one resource type role assigned to them, which means that you're saying that they could do different types of work on a project. So in an IT shop, a lot of times a project manager can do the work of a business analyst. So you might give them the project manager role as their main role, but a business analyst as a secondary role. Project Insight can then match the resource type role required on the task with those users who also have that resource type role as part of their skill sets. And that provides you with some very powerful resource management functionality. And doing all of that is covered in detail in the resource allocation and balancing workloads training sessions. Now you'll also notice that there are two additional columns on this resource type role form, and that's the default time code and the default expense code. And you can see that for a project manager, we've got those codes filled in. So basically, what you can do here is set which of the time and expense codes is used most commonly for this resource type role. So that way, it reduces the amount of data entry you must do when entering time, and it helps to eliminate errors. So that field, as you can see, is optional. It's not set for everything. We just have it set for one resource type role. So you can leave it blank if you don't use it. And how that works is basically Project Insight will check to see if there's a default time and expense code set at the task level. So you can actually set the default time and expense codes for individual tasks and use that as the default if there is one. If there's not one set at the task level, then it uses the one set in here for the resource type role. And then if this one isn't filled in, it'll go and check and see if there's defaults set for each individual user. So there's kind of a hierarchy of how it checks about what default time and expense code to set. But of course, when you're doing your time entry, those are all defaults, and they can always be overridden at the time of your time entry. Now the last setting you're going to see in today's session is for issue tracking. So tracking of issues is a standard project management practice, and most customers use this feature. So click on the arrow next to projects to collapse that. And we want to go to issues. So we're going to click on the arrow next to issues to expand that out. And once we're in there, we're going to click on issues type. So this is the first issues setting. Now all of these settings, as well as the entire process for managing issues, is covered in the Track, Manage, and Report on Issues training sessions if you need to see more detail on all of this. But basically, Project Insight is very flexible about how you can categorize, track, and report on issues. And your system administrator can set that up to support your business processes. So the issue types is where you categorize the different type of issues that occur. So normally issues are related to a project, but they don't have to be. You can create issues independent of a project. And if you do that, your system administrator will set up folders and some processes you should follow. But issue types can be used for reporting purposes, and you can create issues logs, charts, or graphs by this issue type. And the only new column that you're going to see in this setting is something called the default value column. So if you have one issue type that is most commonly used, you can set it as the default by clicking the edit icon for that issue type and then just making sure that default value box is checked. So only one issue type can be set as the default, and if you check that option for any other issue type, but this one is already set, then it's going to remove this one as the default and set the new one that you selected as the default instead. So it'll never let you enter more than one default, because that makes sense. You can't have more than one default, basically. So you'll want to talk to your team and reference any other previous issues lists to define what those issue types will be. Then next you have the issue's priority types. So this is where you set the priority of the issue. And some common examples are low, medium, high, or urgent. Or you may also just want to enter a number such as 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then priority types are also used for reporting purposes and to determine what order issues should be worked on. Next we have the issue severity types. So this is another way to identify an issue. And severity identifies how the issue impacts a project. And some common severities, again, are minor, major, and critical. Then we also have an issue status type. And status types are used to indicate the different phases of the life cycle that your issues go through. They are used for reporting purposes and to manage the issue. And then the last setting we have in here that we're going to cover today is the issue resolution type. So you always want to know from a reporting perspective whether an issue was resolved or not. And this is a very valuable reporting tool. Your simplest form of resolution type may just be a resolved or unresolved type. Or it could include things like, you're going to resolve it by putting in a change order. So that brings us to the end of our agenda items today, and you should now be able to go in and set up all of your main Project Insight settings. And just a couple notes, you may find that these settings evolve as your project management processes mature. And you can always come back to these settings and add new ones or make existing ones inactive, as we've talked about. So you can see, we've got the active column. And you'll also see that some of this information is covered in detail in some other training session topics to which they're applicable. But to get some more information on some of the other options in the administration sections, besides the things that we've talked about today, then you'll want to attend your Determine Best Configuration Options training session. And that'll give you some more information on those. All right, and with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Denise to see if there's any questions and also present some closing slides. Denise.
Awesome. Thank you, Angie. All right, so for those of you that are on social media, I'd like to invite you to follow us on our Twitter. Our handle is @ProjectInsight. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and of course, you can always hit a like on our page on Facebook. If you're not already a Project Insight user and would like to learn more, please feel free to reach us via phone, email, or request your demo at projectinsight.net. And finally, in our Project Insight community, you'll find many recorded videos and webinars for you to watch and learn from. You can sign up for your next product training, project management training, or IT methodology training. That is all we have for you today. We'd like to thank Angie for a great session and, of course, thank our audience as usual for your time, and we hope to have you on board next time. Thank you and have a great day.